Hello, my name is Tracey Dutton and I'm the Senior Lead for Safeguarding and Family Support at the Vale Academy, and today I'm going to talk to you about children and anxiety. So let's have a look at what the aims of today's session are. Firstly, to develop a greater sense of what anxiety is and how it presents, to develop some understanding of what cognitive behaviour therapy is and how this might help, to develop some techniques that you can try out and some strategies for working with parents. It's important to note at this stage that what we're going to look at today is to support only mildly anxious young people. Those with very severe symptoms will need to get more professional support. And lastly, but above all, to hopefully develop your confidence in working in this area. So what is anxiety? I would like you to pause the video for one moment just to think about the words that you may associate with anxiety, and have a think about young people who are in your settings that you think may be presenting with anxiety, and look at some of those behaviours and how they present. Probably the most important message that you will take from this presentation today is that anxiety is in fact a normal and vital response. We don't attempt to get rid of anxiety. What we aim to do is manage it much more effectively. Before we move on to look at how we can effectively manage anxiety, it is helpful to see a developmental context to anxiety. Take some time to have a look at this slide. It shows the age we would expect to see the onset of normative fears. So at what point should we then become concerned about anxiety? Well, firstly, we should be concerned when the anxiety appears to be excessive and persistent compared to their peers, or when the anxiety interferes with their day-to-day functioning, or when the anxiety causes the child or young person significant distress. So now it's time to be a detective. Think about the things we need to notice and maybe look out for. There are 3 areas that would help us. We can look at the physical symptoms. So a child or young person may present with recurring headaches, often complain of a tummy ache, or needing to go to the toilet much more often than normal. And then we will have the emotions. We could have a young person who is very tearful, shows lots of worry, or exhibits lots of anger. And then we have the behaviour and thoughts. We will have those young people who will avoid situations. For example, they don't want to do PE. We may have children whose attendance to school suffers, and it's really important to really look at those children whose attendance becomes poor. And then we'll have those young people who have heightened fear of everyday things. This is an example list and not everything. But have a look at that young person and just notice if things are different or out of the ordinary for that young person. So now it's time to take those detective skills a stage further. It's really important to actually talk to the young person, but support them to understand that they are not alone and to normalise what they are feeling and going through. Remember the earlier slide that said anxiety is a normal and vital response. We must really listen to the young person, giving them lots of opportunity to talk about what they're feeling and what they are thinking. But don't feel pressured to have the answer straight away. Often listening and providing praise for talking can be beneficial, and it makes a good start. Whilst listening to that young person, it is really important to consider what else might be going on. Now that we've had the opportunity to speak with that young person and really take the time to listen to their thoughts and their feelings, it may be that we've also learnt that there are other factors going on in their lives that are beyond their control. Let's have a look at the anxiety curve to see how that fits in. You will notice at the bottom there is a baseline, and you will notice at the top a loss of control line. The gap between these 2 lines will vary depending on the influencing factors around us. We all have a baseline, and some of us will take a long time to get to the loss of control line. but those of us that have got influencing factors going on in our lives will mean that the baseline and the loss of control line will become closer together, and a young person will reach a crisis phase much faster. So it is a good idea to try and identify some of those anxiety behaviours, then the defensive behaviours, before they reach those crisis behaviours. Now that we've done our detective work, it's now time to start helping that young person learn how to manage their anxiety much more effectively. The first stage of this is to get them to understand a little bit about the workings of the brain. The first part of the brain I refer to as the lizard brain or reptilian brain. And I explain to the young person that this is the part of the brain that's in charge of keeping us safe and out of danger. It only knows how to react to dangerous things. And when it spots something dangerous, it sends a message around our body to get us to react really quickly. And there is a chemical release which is called adrenaline. When I work with a young person, I like to do things visually. I find it helps for them to understand. This is an activity I do using Play-Doh. Together we build the three-parted brain. We start with the lizard brain. This is the part of the brain that seeks out danger and responds. This is the part of the brain that we cannot change. We then build on the mammal brain, and I explain to the young person that this part of the brain evolved later. And this is where we hold our emotions, our memories, and our habits. These things can be changed. The next part of the brain to evolve was the human brain, and this is the area of the brain that allows us to use our imagination, reasoning, and to be able to rationalise a situation. Have you heard the term flip your lid? Well, imagine the human brain lifted up and not there. So our ability to actually reason and rationalise the situation has gone. In order for that to work, we have to make sure that the mammal brain is settled. And this is where we need to do work around our emotions and our memories in order for the human brain to work to the best that it can. When talking about the lizard brain with the young person, explain to them that when our brain sees danger, it makes us respond in three ways. And this is the fight, flight, freeze situation. Ask them to give you ideas of situations where they've wanted to stand and fight, run away, and freeze. You could help them out by giving them an example of somebody seeing a spider. What do they do? Another really good activity to do with your young person is to get them to think about the effects that worry or anxiety has on their bodies. What does their body look like? What does their body feel like? I know lots of things to compare this with. Get that young person to maybe lay down on a large piece of paper and have the outline of their body drawn. And then using coloured pencils or pens, you can get them to label what happens to the parts of their body. And when that is done, get them to think about other things that make them feel that way. For example, if they are queuing up to go on an exciting ride at a theme park, does that also give them shaking legs and shivers? And does it make their heart race? When they're perhaps going to visit the dentist, do they also have similar feelings? By doing this activity, you are teaching the young person that regardless of the situation, our bodies will respond in exactly the same way. And this is where their memories are built up into that mammal part of the brain. So something that made their bodies react in a certain way once before, made their heart race, gave them butterflies in their tummy, stored in their memory, and now they've associated that feeling with something scary. So we've spoken to that young person and we've given them an understanding of what anxiety is and why their bodies are responding in such a way. It's now important to understand what else is happening. Start with general and move on to more specific questions. For example, How long has this been happening for? Start to identify the thoughts, the feelings and the behaviours associated with the anxiety. Notice if there are any patterns. And probably most importantly, what impact is this having on the young person? At this point, we're going to have a quick look at cognitive behaviour therapy, CBT for short. Another good activity is to get the young person to once again draw down exactly what is going on. You start with the thought. What is it they are thinking? You then move on to the feelings that they are feeling, and then get them to talk about how that's affecting their bodies. And from that you can talk about their behaviour. What behaviour are they now starting to exhibit? As you can see from the chart, it moves in any direction. The idea being that if we can change an aspect around this chart, it will affect more positively the others. When the young person has drawn out their chart, the first step to do is to actually challenge their thought box. Explain to the young person that the thought is exactly that. It is just a thought. It isn't real, it isn't true, and probably hasn't happened yet. An example may be that a young person doesn't want to stand up in class to read something aloud for fear that their classmates may laugh at them. Challenge them. Has this actually happened for real? And if not, then what makes them think that they will laugh? And by not standing up in class, what is it that they're missing out on? What impact will this have on them? Let's once again think back to the three-part brain and the third part, which is the human brain, where we do our problem solving. Often when we are anxious, it becomes hard to work out answers to solutions to our difficulties. So we need to teach young people clear methods for problem solving that can prove to be very effective. Let's start with 1, helping the child or young person to identify what is the problem. And then we're going to investigate what sort of problem it is. What is it stopping that young person from doing? And also, have they faced a problem like this before? Then we can take some time to share some ideas. What might help solve the problem? How could you get around the problem? Have they got around a problem like this before? And 4th, invite help. Who would they like help from? Who could help them to get around this problem or cope with it better? Now we have all the information we need, we can start to put together a plan of how to gradually expose this young person to their feared situation. It is really important that the child has control over the process and it is not completely led by you. It is also really important that the parents are involved from the beginning. An idea would be to sit down and create a hierarchy with easy situations first. Perhaps give some examples. Get the young person to brainstorm a list of feared situations and then assign a worry rating from 1 to 5 of each of those situations. And next we are going to build a step ladder. This is just one example of a ladder to success that you could use in your settings. I have used a ladder to success on a number of occasions, and today I'm going to speak to you about one particular child who, by using a ladder to success, was able to overcome their fear and worry. After speaking with this young person's parents about their poor attendance, we established that the young person had a fear of reading aloud in class. The next step was to spend time with this young person, helping them to understand that anxiety and worry was our body's normal reaction. Once this young person understood that that feeling was quite normal and that everybody feels it every now and again, they were able to open up a little bit more, and together we were able to problem solve the situation. The next step was the young person agreeing to come to school every day. They weren't expected to go immediately to class, but had a meet and greet with a key worker every morning who could check on how that young person was feeling and give them an opportunity to talk about anything that worried them. The next step was for that young person to attend the lesson they feared the most, and it was agreed with the teacher that there would be a minimal expectation on what that young person was expected to achieve. This was agreed between the teacher and the young person. The next step was the teacher agreed to read the young person's work aloud to the class but anonymously, so the class would not know whose work it was. That way the young person was able to see the type of feedback their peer group was giving. The next step, the young person agreed to read to their teacher alone without the class hearing, which gave them confidence in their reading ability. Over time, this young person grew more and more confident in their ability by taking these steps, and eventually overcame their fear and worry and was able to read aloud in class in front of their peers. This young person was able to then take their SATs and leave our school very successfully. When working with parents, it is really important that we involve them from the very beginning of the process. But along the way, there are lots of things the parents have to do themselves in order to help and support their children. It is important for us to help the parents encourage their children to face their fears. Encourage the parents to be positive role models, showing them that they too will often have fears and worries, and talk to their children about how they overcome them. Encourage the parents to ask their children questions rather than providing them with reassurances. Ask them to praise and reward brave behaviour, and to not overly respond to anxious behaviour. I'm sure many of you have issues where children avoid coming to school, and that is a parent's over-response to their child showing anxious behaviour. Ask the parents to model brave, non-avoidant behaviour themselves. You can also recommend to the parents reading websites that might help. Encourage parents to help their children live a healthy, balanced lifestyle, making sure that their school and home life, there is a balance. There's lots of physical activity which does help with managing anxiety. Above all, encourage the parents to listen and acknowledge that these things can be difficult, and if necessary, direct those parents to access their own support. When working with young people, and especially their parents, it really is important for them to understand what maintains anxiety. We shouldn't be giving reassurance to the young people saying, "Don't worry, it will be okay." In some respects, we are just papering over what it is that's worrying them by giving them those reassurances. Our lizard brain means that most of the time we will always have negative automatic thoughts. Or put it another way, we jump to conclusions, and often that conclusion is the wrong one. Parents and carers believe that they are doing the right thing sometimes by protecting their child from the thing that they fear the most. And more often than not, that means avoiding school. And avoidance doesn't make the problem go away, it just reinforces it. When we are worried, stressed, or feeling anxious, our bodies automatically become tense. But in reverse, physical tension can also be a maintaining factor for many problems, including anxiety. So it helps if we can learn to relax our bodies. Relaxation comes in two forms. We have formal relaxation and informal relaxation. Formal relaxation includes progressive muscle relaxation, calming breath or square breathing, and calming pictures, also known as imagery. Informal relaxation will include things like having a bath, yoga, and listening to music, etc. Progressive muscle relaxation is an activity that you could do on a one-to-one basis with a young person, in a small group, or indeed it's something that can be done with the whole class. This would be especially good after the children have returned from a lunch break, as it will help to relax and ease the tensions from the lunchtime play. The idea is that you work from your head all the way down to your toes, tensing and releasing your muscles and breathing in and breathing out in relaxation. Calming breath activity again can be done on an individual basis or with a whole class. And the idea is that you sit comfortably with your eyes closed and imagine that there is an empty balloon inside your chest. If it makes it more fun, you can ask the young person to imagine the colour of that balloon. Now ask that young person to breathe in as slowly as possible through their nose to try and make that balloon as big as possible within their chest. And now ask that young person to let the air out of their mouths as slowly as possible. Take a couple of normal breaths and then repeat the activity for about a minute. You can end with wiggling your fingers and toes and then open your eyes. Third formal activity with relaxation is to work with calming pictures. If you have young people who struggle with their imagination, it would be really helpful to have a bank of different images that they could refer to. And once they've had time to observe, once again you ask that young person to close their eyes and you work your way through their senses. What can they see? What can they hear? What can they taste? What can they smell? And what can they touch? With all these activities, you could make it really fun by getting the children to check their heart rates at the start and at the end. Hopefully by the end they are much more relaxed. Finally, I would like to share with you some of the resources that I have used whilst working with the young people in my school. The books by Dr. Karen Treisman on the right hand side also come accompanied with additional activity packs and resources, all of which I would highly recommend. I hope this presentation has now given you the confidence to work in this area and has given you a better insight into how to manage and understand anxiety. I thank you very much for your time.